You guys Hunter. Hunter's known about this for like 2 years. I was talking about this because they broke it nicely. Hunter. I remember talking about it. I think it's the difference between I want to have like especially
But why?
Last year?
But
Yeah.
okay. And you save some material.
It is right now.
It's like a drink zone. You want to cut your break, you just pull your string out.
Have that. Have a final point. What?
This is my instinct that went. That's not fun. Oh,
Ways to connect to where's the back?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I have to show him that one.
hair almost.
Yeah.
It looks like hair now.
Oh yeah. Oh my god, wait, yeah, Mark left.
That's what we're attempting.
I know there's people. Monster, that's, I know there's no people tonight, so they can also listen to this.
So I'll bring it over right back.
It's all yeah.
You want my help?
Sit around for a little bit, and then we sit around for a little bit, connect some stuff. So I'm ready to have some work ready.
Is it just knotted?
I have to data and come back. That's fine. Like,
I'll preserve the bag.
I will be coming back like at 9, 10. I feel like that'll be the next week too. So
Do you want a knife or do you want to preserve the bag? Yeah. If I can pull it on, I know you got it.
yeah, not permanent. I know you can't. Blew ourselves out. It's already past 3 p.m. That's not saying. Oh, fuck.
Screw heat transfer. Screw heat transfer.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Screw heat transfer.
Is that just
Screw him.
Should I do this the right way? The wrong way?
Yeah.
Hey, you want to
He's gonna make it complicated.
If I do it, so we don't really have the material to do it the right way. Tomorrow, we just mylar around the foam.
I went for the first, the first exam. I didn't learn anything. I did better on the second exam. Not going to a single one that I did on the first one. Going to all of them.
Yeah.
That's like pissing off.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just wondering what I should do for this one.
Yeah, so at that point, I mean, not to graduate, I'm not going to fight with the team at that point. You know what I mean? Like,
Hey, Mark just talked to him usually when he gets points.
I think
that's good.
for the sake of the
I mean, the points never hurt, but I'm not going to fight
You are
him.
recording.
I'm already recording?
Yes. You will be on my YouTube.
Make sure you throw your Instagram handle at the end.
Yeah.
Follow me for more carbon fiber manufacturing.
You have to do it the right way.
How much?
Yeah, this looks difficult to do by yourself.
Yeah.
And so this is just kind of like arbitrary, whatever's big enough to fit it. Right?
Right, so you always want to obviously make sure you conserve whatever you
Yeah,
can.
yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. What?
Why the left?
You're missing the cool part.
No, it's not. It's not.
Let's see. Get some of this.
It's only 440.
I really don't want to pull this up.
They didn't really let.
I'm just going to use some.
Stepped out of nowhere.
Can you get some scrap time? Okay.
We have it in
Okay. You think of everything? Yeah. So we have to take the bag now. If you're using the same bag for both your wings, make sure you put a lot of care and love into it.
Okay.
Because this bag is inherently cheap and will potentially rip on you. And also this tape is really strong, so after your layup, I recommend instead of trying to pull the bag off, like pull the tape off of the bag, you just cut straight down of it and then retape it. Every time you tape, you also want to put the bag over and look at the tape to make sure that there's no bubbles or anywhere that air could escape. One of the most important parts that people tend to forget, I find. Also, composites is an inherently expensive and extremely messy thing. So while you're doing it, I highly recommend that you wear your worst clothes because I don't think I have a good pair of clothes anymore. So you can see this kind of thing. You really don't want that, right? Because that's a channel that air can escape. The best way to get rid of that is take the tape between your two fingers, pull the bag, and then try to smack it down as much as possible. If it becomes a problem during the layup, once we start pulling vacuum, you'll hear it. You'll hear the air try to escape. But at this point, everything's ready to go. And realistically, I didn't have to tape from here all the way down because what we're gonna do is fold it over. But I did so anyways because I forgot. You also always want to make sure that you have everything ready before you do the layup, because once you pour the resin, then you're on a time crunch, and the resin cures in about 20 minutes, but it takes 6 to 10 hours to fully cure. So if you forget anything after you pour that resin, you're gonna be very stressed. That's why I always do this double checking. Okay. So the last thing I'll need is peel ply. Where'd that go? No. Yes. Okay, cool. So just to run over everything real quick. This, obviously, is your foam core. This is your wing, your mold. This is the carbon fiber going over the wing. And then after you pour the resin on the carbon fiber in the wing, you take the peel ply. And what peel ply is it's a release. So it's a release fabric. You put it over the carbon fiber, it gives it a texture. And then the textured carbon fiber, after it's done curing, you'll be able to peel the ply off of the carbon fiber, and you'll end up with a fully soaked resin wing composite. On top of that, once we get everything ready, there's one more thing, which is the cotton breather, and that just allows the vacuum to pull air over the entire surface area of the wing, which is applying equal pressure everywhere. So, all that being said, everything should be ready. If somebody, I don't know, there's a lot of people here, so I don't know if anyone wants to get their hands dirty. Yeah? Okay, cool. So I got gloves. You always want to make sure you wear gloves. And if you would like to cut a small piece of this peel ply. Yeah, just around the carbon fiber.
Just straight up cut a box.
Yeah. Okay. You can make sure you leave like a half inch to an inch excess in there. So. Also, this is probably the worst conditions for doing composites. You always want to do it in a cold environment with minimal dust. This is a hot environment with maximum dust. The reason unless it's not clear, the reason you want it to be cold is because that epoxy hardens based on the temperature. And if the ambient temperature is hot, then it's going to harden faster than 20 minutes. And as far as the applications of school and design go, dust is a minimal factor, but it will affect the integrity of your structure, composite-wise. So you want to minimize that as much as possible.
We may have an aero design lab very soon. I'm talking with the department now.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah, in the MAC building.
We complain enough?
Now, it took me a month to get approved by a printer. You probably won't see it before you graduate.
Oh no. There's a couple of those things that started here. I thought the Herbie would be built, or wouldn't be built until I graduated. They got that done.
Already?
Yeah, but nothing ever really happens in there.
Yeah.
At least not for undergrad. At least that's the designing society now there. They used to do that in Flint. I love that little building. It's so cute. It's old. It's like from the 20s. So now, it creaks every single 4 words. They used to do the big conventions there.
So what I need you to do is, so normally, if you're doing a wing like this, the resin will always take the form of whatever surface finish you're on. So that's why a lot of composites is done on glass, especially flat plates, which is literally just a flat plate. If you do it on the glass has minimal porosity, which means that the resin is going to take a very shiny finish, and it looks very nice, very clean. But if you do it on, say, peel ply, which if you look at the peel ply, it's kind of textured,
Cloth.
yeah, very clothy fabric, it's going to take the finish of that, and it's going to look not as nice. So the wings won't be glossy, but you could sand them and then clear coat them if you want the aesthetic appeal. All that being said, though, if you are going to do the layup, on the glass, make sure that you have something on the glass itself, because when you pour the resin on the carbon, it's gonna seep through, and you're gonna end up with this. And then other design teams or other people who are using the table are gonna get very mad at you, especially if you don't clean up. So normally we use Mylar, which is just a very glossy fabric, but we don't have that. So I think we should do just a spare bag, or literally anything that we don't mind messing up. Yeah, that's not ours though.
Got another one of those and throw it on the bottom, or?
Another bag?
We're talking about that bag in the left room.
Yeah.
I think that's ours. Probably take it.
I think there's Aaron's bag in that bay. Let me go check really quick.
I'm pretty sure it's televised. Probably, yeah.
Cool.
I think it already started. I think it started at 4, right? Oh, never mind. That's when the tailgate started. My bad. That's all anyone does about time with the tailgate.
So, can you open this? If you're doing a
Shake
flat,
it?
no. Well, yeah. If you're doing a flat plate, always use a scraper. However, I don't think we're doing any flat plates, unless you want. So, okay, let me just say this. There's a couple methods you can do. Depends on what you prefer. If you want, and you have a table like this with cloth or whatever set down, you can lay your carbon directly over this, pour the resin on top of it, and then use a scraper, and then, you know, kind of push that resin into the fibers, and then you'll pick up the carbon and put it over your wing. Alternatively, you could use a paintbrush. These are single use, unfortunately, because once the resin gets on there, you can't really wash it out. But use the paintbrush, and then you put it over, or you put the carbon fiber over your mold, and then you brush in the resin that way. I think that that's the way I'm going to do it for this one. I'll do one carbon piece with the scraper and one with the paintbrush. And then just so you guys get both demonstrations. Okay, so this is something that a lot of people mess up. This epoxy and hardener is a 3-to-1 ratio. You can see it right here, 3-to-1. That is by volume. If you're using a scale, the ratio is 3.33 to 1. That was just found from density calculations, all that stuff. So really, if you do like 30-10, 30 of this and 10 of this, you're not gonna mess up your layup, but you will notice that the cup gets really hot. If you do 33 and 10, it'll be just a little better. And I like to do just a little better. So you're gonna turn on your scale with the cup on it, zeroed, and you're always measuring in grams. And then you pour this, and you always wanna make sure you kinda have an idea of how much you're gonna do. So for a layup of this size, I would say that you would most likely want something along the lines of 33 to 10 to start, because you can always add more, you can't really take it away, or 66-20 for everything. So I'm gonna do 33-10 just in case, you know, we run out, which I don't think is gonna happen, but always better to be safe.
Look at that.
And if you go over, don't really worry about it. Just add,
Just a little, I'll say what the other side is.
yeah. And then you tar it, tear it. I don't really know how to pronounce that.
Tear,
Tear, right? Yeah.
You don't just like count up to 43 though?
No, I would
Yeah.
I would never, So now that we have 33 and 10, or 11, one thing to know is in industry, the bubbles in the resin will affect the integrity of your layup. So you always want to go slow with mixing. But for the applications that we use here, it does not really matter that much. So I always mix, and if there's bubbles, that's okay. But one of the ways to get rid of the bubbles is a blowtorch. Another way to get rid of the bubbles is a pressure chamber. And I think that's a little excessive.
That's the pressure chamber, right?
That's one of them, yeah. That's a vacuum chamber.
When do you know you're done mixing?
So you'll know you're done mixing when you look inside the resin, and if you see any swirls or anything, that means that there's still resin in there and it hasn't fully mixed with the hardener. Doesn't look like there's any swirls. From here, you want to make sure all of the hairs are out of the paintbrush, because these are cheap paintbrushes. And then I'll do one with the carbon on, I'll do that one last actually. So super easy. Take your mold and you want to fold it over the leading edge. And if you're concerned about aesthetics, you could spend the time it takes to make sure the weave is all straight, because after all, this is a fiber. So if the weave isn't straight, it might look kind of weird, but you know, it'll be functional. And then once you have everything and you can feel the leading edge with your finger on this side, then as simple as it is, you just pour the resin on top. I'm gonna get rid of my watch. And then you brush it in. So you can see the carbon start to get wet here. The biggest problem with layups, and make no mistake, a wing layup is one of the harder layups you could do because of the complex geometry of it, is leaving a dry spot. If you leave a dry spot, it's not really gonna make or break your layup, but it's not great, because then you don't actually have a composite. You have half a composite where resin is infused in some of it and then it's dry in some others. And again, if you're worried about the aesthetic quality of it, you can always wait before you start moving the brush back and forth so that you don't accidentally move the weave. And then you can tap the resin in and keep going that way. Once everything's wet, then you can start kind of pushing the resin in. And if you look over here, you can kind of see the dry spot. You need to use the light to your advantage. So everything over here is glossy, it's wet, but when you use the light to your advantage, you see this carbon right up here is dry. And then, I mean, you just take the resin and wet it up. This is my preferred method. The only downside to using a paintbrush to apply resin is the fact that the paintbrush tends to include a lot of resin. So if you're going for something super lightweight, a dry or a wet layup like this is not the ideal layup. Sorry, it's infusion or pre-preg because the amount of resin is controlled by gravity and the manufacturer. So once all this is dry, or not dry, once all this is wet, you can flip it over and do the other side.
Will it stick to that leading edge well?
This,
Yeah, are you all worried about it coming out from that pocket?
you mean after the layup?
While you're doing it, well, like during it.
Oh yeah, no, it'll so
Sticks to it?
it will for the most part stick to it. However, the more resin you add, the better, because while you're doing the layup, you got to keep in mind that this is still a fabric. It's just a wet fabric, so it will move around. And like I said, wings are one of the harder things to do, so it'll move around quite a bit. You just got to be careful and keep playing with it. If anyone wants to measure up, another 33 and 10.
So what's the solution for the tips going on the fence
The leading edge or the trailing edge?
the root
Oh,
tip.
for
Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
poured way faster than I
confused.
thought it would.
So if you're using a super, I'm guessing swept, right?
Rear
Or
swept, not forward swept.
okay, cool, yeah.
Little bit.
So if you're using one of those, the solution is, unfortunately, deal with it. It is a fabric, so there are things for complex geometries called relief cuts. If it's really bad and you notice that it's starting to kind of crumple in on itself, you just make a relief cut exactly where it's crumpling, and then you could fold the carbon over itself. But normally that won't happen with these wings because the carbon just kind of molds the shape.
Do you think it would be beneficial to pinch at the trailing edge for like some type of plant?
Honestly, no. The best thing to do is wait until it gets under vacuum and then take it
And shut it.
and yeah, just kind of mold it with your hands.
What's your solution for the trailing edge? So cutting the asphalt.
Right. So that's the worst part of composites in my experience. That's post-processing, and ideally you want to cut your carbon so that there's minimal post-processing, because one, it's very, very dangerous. You always need to wear a respirator or a mask, a dust mask at the very least. And two, it's just dirty. It's really dirty. You look like a coal miner when you're done. But yeah, once this is cured, everything's going to be hard except for the parts I applied resin to, obviously. And then you either take scissors and cut the dry carbon off, and then a Dremel and Dremel the wet carbon off, and then you have to sand everything smooth.
Drum with the cutoff too.
Yeah, but that does suck a lot. So should also be mentioned that one ply of carbon, because there's core on this. That's good. Because there's core on this, one ply of carbon should be good enough. But just for aesthetics, if you use another ply, any voids or spots that you could see through the initial ply will be covered.
So I know for the fuselage for DBF, they have to pick away at the interior. Are you picking away at the interior foam once this is hardened?
You can if you want.
It takes a really long time.
For these thinner sections, it's not really worth it, right?
I wouldn't pick away at anything, to be honest. It's light, the foam is light, the carbon's fine. Design Build Fly, I think when I was talking to them about their weight problem, they were saying that the they had a lot bigger of a weight problem than initially let on. So I think it was just a good fix for them. Also, if you would like hollow wings, a good way to do that is put peel ply between the carbon and the foam. Or alternatively, you could just, or you could do that. Or you could soak it in acetone, but that's expensive. So you can see all of these air pockets right here at the leading edge. All of this is gonna affect the quality. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna wait. A lot of people will try to make sure this is perfect originally, but you have to wait until it's under vacuum and then you can start playing with it because it's still a wet fabric. So that was the paintbrush method. Your hands still get a little dirty. This is the other method. This one's quick and dirty. Emphasis on dirty. So you can see this is a lot easier than the paintbrush method. Once you get that resin in there,
Which one can get higher quantity?
which one can get higher what?
Higher quantity.
Quantity?
Yeah. Which method?
Quality or quantity?
Better quantity.
I mean, realistically, it depends on your application. If you're using complex geometry, it's always better to use a paintbrush. But this is, honestly, I would only really do this if you don't have a paintbrush. But this is the cheap option and the easy option. And the other downside to this is you could do this on the first layer of your carbon, but if you do this on the second layer, because the first layer is going to be covered by the second one, right? So if you do this on the second layer, once you peel this up, the entire weave is messed up. So that's probably the biggest disadvantage of this method. Yeah, now that you have the carbon on your foam, the next thing to do is apply the peel ply, which is right there. Just cover all the carbon. So you could, honestly, let's move this. And then you can place this on there. Yeah. So just by hand touching this, I can tell that this is getting warm, which means that either I need to hurry up or it's just warm outside. I would bank on I need to hurry up though, because I've been doing this for a bit. With peel ply, this is gonna be really annoying for the people with, I'm pretty sure all the planes have this from what I remember, the swept wings, because the fabric really likes to go straight. It doesn't like changing directions at all. But you want it to be as straight as possible with no gaps or bubbles or anything like that. So you don't want this. You can push that down. If you do find a gap or a bubble with your swept wing, don't really worry about it. it will show up. Everything you see in the peel ply right now will show up in the final layup. Unfortunately, that's the way it is, but you could sand it away if you want after you're done, or just fix it some other way. So yeah, once this is done, we get the breather out. I want to make sure I didn't get resin on me. And then, like swaddling a newborn baby, you just put it in there. And from this point, it's good if one person keeps their gloves on, but you never want to handle the bag with resin-soaked gloves, because if your resin-soaked gloves handle the bag, then you're pretty much screwed. Yeah. You also don't want to do the bag anywhere that resin has been. So we'll move this a little bit. So once you have the bag looking like this, you have a pocket for your carbon to go into. Once you're done, if you're going to reuse the same bag, always make sure that you cut off just one part. I would cut off this part. That way you don't have to retape the entire sides and waste tape. You only have to retape the top. So now that the bag is made and the carbon's ready, I'm gonna put it in here. And where's the bag? Oh, here it is. So there's a thing in composites called a resin trap, which looks like this. Some are smaller, some are larger. But the main purpose of the resin trap is if any of the resin that was soaked into the carbon fiber or anywhere else gets into this vacuum line and travels all the way down the vacuum line into the vacuum, you just wasted about $300. So the resin trap is to make sure that that goes through the line into the trap and then doesn't go into the vacuum. The trick around buying a resin trap, though, is making your own. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And you never really have to redo it. But you just make a small square. And then cut a little piece in here. It'll go pretty far down. Yeah. And you want to fill it with a little bit of cotton to soak any resin that comes through it. You have your very own resin trap. There's a few things in here. There's a lot of different ways you could pull vacuum. One of the ways is cutting an insert into the bag itself, and there's a thing called a puck and a through bag connector. Basically what it is you put it on top of the vacuum line and then you insert it through the bag. I'd show you if there was one next to me, but it's in the cabinet and I'm lazy. The other way is you just stick it through the bag itself, through the cotton, and then you pull that way. I think that way is the best way because the through bag connectors are only really used for pre-preg, infusion, all that stuff. So yeah.
Oh shit. Yeah. With the hose.
So doing it this way, sucking bag through this method, you always want to make sure that when you start taking the air out of the bag itself doesn't get sucked through the hose. And the best way to do that is just take the breather and wrap it around the hose just a little bit. And so now you can plug it in. And then you can see the bag starts to suck. So from this point, I don't know if you can see this, but the leading edge right here is coming out, and that's going to show up in the final product. So the best way to do that is, or the best way to fix that, I guess, is to turn the vacuum off, let some air escape, and then use your own hands to kind of mold the bag around that. So turn it back on.
It'd be nice to have a check valve.
Yeah, there's one on the resin traps, but so from this point, you have to start listening for holes. And I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there is a hole coming from right there. So I don't know if you want to put your ear up against that, but you can hear the air coming out.
Oh yeah.
So just pinch it down, and 9 times out of 10, air is going to come out of the corners, wherever the bag is applied to the tube, and any edges that you spliced bag tape. So you should hear a change in tone from the vacuum when you start pulling really tight, and it's already started, so you can't really hear it now. But a way to check it is with the pull test, and this is really stretchy bag, so you're really not going to get much of a like tight pull on this, but you can see that it is actually pulling a lot. If you want to actually see if you're pulling a lot, you come to this one, and you can't even lift the bag off the cotton. It's good.
Is that less stretchy bag?
Yeah, that's high temp infusion bag. What I'm doing right now is doing one final check before calling it to see if there's any areas of leakage, pushing down everywhere, because this has to stay under vacuum for 6 to 10 hours. So you normally leave, you don't watch it, and then you just want to make sure that once you leave, everything's good.
So you just let the motor go?
Yep. The only way that motor is going to overheat is if you leave it for over a day.
Is it okay if they live in your lab like overnight?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So I don't know if you guys want to get a feel for what like a good bag pull is.
She's all good done.
Don't break it.
Fight.
Yeah. But yeah, if you're pulling anything less than that, there's a chance that you're not gonna end up with a good quality layup. Yeah, that's about it. If you want, you could always just push it down here with your fingers.
All right, okay.
That's your back.
Yes.
Do you know how much vacuum?
What?
Do you know?
No, I didn't check. Ask him.
Do you know how much vacuum it pulls? Yeah.
Doesn't seem like there's any adjustment.
Yeah. So this pulls a maximum of around 27 inches of mercury. So a little, like I think 0.8 atmospheres, 0.8 something atmospheres. You could attach a gauge to it with a resin trap, obviously. I mean, the more vacuum, the better. But you never want to crush your mold.
There's no adjustment on this, is there?
No. With the resin trap, there would be though.
Okay.
Because you can adjust this valve, and then you have
Should
the
we
pressure
also buy
gauge here.
that one?
You could. Yeah. And just make sure you clean up. That's it.
Thank you.